unveil his final squad for the next two African Cup of Nations Morocco 2025 qualifiers. So the coach will unveil his list. Afterwards, we will take some questions from the media. So, coach, this is your show.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming in this afternoon. It's good to see a full room. I think that shows us the interest that both you guys in the Fourth Estate as well as the Gambian public generally have in the squad at the moment. So that's very positive for me, the staff, the federation, the players. So thank you for taking the time. In terms of just before we get into the squad in itself, the details, obviously, naming a national team squad is never easy because there's a lot of players for consideration. But one of the nice things for Gambian football at the moment is it's becoming progressively more difficult to name the squad because we've got a lot of guys out there playing at a good level of the game, and also they're getting regular minutes. You know, I think you can look at probably our top 40 players. Pretty much all of them are starting week in, week out with clubs at top tier football. And then you've got another 100 or so players who are breaking through, progressing in their development. So that's really positive for Gambian football. So in terms of the squad itself, we think it's a really competitive group. There's going to be some players who are very disappointed to miss out because, like we said, that competition for places. You know, I say to the coaching staff, the best coach in football is competition. If you've got competition for your place, you know you've got to be playing well week in, week out. Otherwise, you're going to be out. We're missing some players who were with us in June, and that's disappointing because they did really well in June. But ultimately, if they've got a little injury or maybe they're not getting minutes with their club side, well then international football isn't about being nice all the time. It's about the guys who are performing, who are ready to come and play at their best, because that's the expectation of you and the media. It's the expectation of the Gambian public. And it's also the expectation of us as a coaching staff that we have players playing at their maximum. Okay? So, in terms of the squad itself, we're naming a 24-man list, okay? Which obviously on match day, one will have to sit out because it's 23 on match day, but just for balance and competitiveness, we're naming a 24-man list. Okay, so the goalkeepers: Ibrahim Ajarju, Sheikh Sibi, and Lamin Sedi of Real de Banjul comes into the squad this time. So 3 goalkeepers. In defense, we've got Ibu Toure, Seni Sanyang, Joseph Cisse joins the squad for the first time. Daddy Dudu Gay, Mamadou Njai joins the squad for the first time. Omar Colley, James Gomez, and Idrissa Cisse. In midfield, we have Hamza Bari, Alassane Mane, Ibu Adams, Ibrahima Darbo, Musa Barrow, and Ablai Jallo. In the forward line, we have Ibrahima Colley, Aliou Fadera, Musa Jawara, Yankuba Minte, Adama Sidibe, Ali So, and coming in for the first time, Abdoulaye Cisse over at Paide, the young striker. Okay. So that's the 24-man list. Like we said, there's a few players a bit unfortunate to miss out, I would have to say. There's a few players' injuries, like even this morning, I actually fielded a phone call from one player who would have been in the squad, but an injury has cropped up and he's not at 100%, so we've made the decision to not bring someone who's 100%, rather than, you know, we want to bring people who are able to come and really push. So that's a 24-man squad. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have. I'm sure there'll be some. And yeah, so back to you, over to them.
Thank you, coach. So, as customary, if you want to ask a question, just introduce yourself in the medium that you represent. So, the floor is now open for questions. Okay, we start with the lady.
Good morning. I'm Jackie from the company, and I have 2 questions for you. So the last match against Gabon ended in 9-8. What are the main strategies are you considering for the qualifiers to ensure better results against your opponent? Given the challenges that you face in this game, how confident are you in the squad that you And what specific strategies or strengths were you looking for in these leagues to make the
No, thank you very much. First of all, we were really happy with the overall performance of the squad back in June. Naturally, in football, it's about wins and losses. We want to get many more wins than losses. So our biggest frustration in the Gabon game, especially, was that we weren't able to. And I think it's fair to say we were dominant for periods in that game, especially in the first half, that we weren't able to convert that dominance in play into more goals. And so for us, we come away frustrated that we didn't take not just 1 point, but all 3 points from that game. But knowing that we've got to go back and we've got to conversion of chances is a big thing for us, you know. And again, this is a new era that we're trying to usher in with the national team. Everybody, I think, federation, coaches, players, the general public were agreed that we wanted to see a more front foot, you know, more aggressive, more positive national team approach. And we've definitely seen that in the opening camp. But now the players need to understand that, well, we're going to create these chances. This is the new Scorpions, if you want. We are going to create chances, but you need to put them away. And so that was the frustrating thing coming out. Obviously, coming into this camp, our ideology, our idea about football isn't changing. You know, for us, we want to go out, we want to attack, and we want to do that for as often as we can, at as high quality a level as we can in the games. Obviously, there's a bit of a difference in the squad. Last time out, there was a number of guys at the end of a long season were missing through injury. We welcome some of those guys back in, so I think the quality of the squad will be a bit more competitive this time around. And I think, like I've already said, when you have that competition, I think that reflects in the results that our performances deserve. So we're looking forward to the games. The two games are going to be very different than the last two. Comoros, very difficult opponent, top of their World Cup group, very hard-working opponent. And then Tunisia, someone recently described Tunisia to me as the Germany of Africa, because they always qualify every time they go, they just know how to get it done. But as the Gambia, we've got a pretty good record against North African opponents. So we go into the games confident, we respect our opponents, but we go in super confident that we can play to a level that will take points that we need.
Good morning, my name is Michael from TV. As you previously said last time, most of us have question and it's the same to the right of play. I'll first start with considering the opponent, Congress and Tunisia you just mentioned now. What strategic consideration went into selecting the players to ensure the team is well able to challenge when they face the challenge the points to one? The other two is, you previously also mentioned that no player signed a contract with the national team that will ever perform will be brought in. Considering 4 new players in the squad, can you kindly certify on the impact that you will put in the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms of strategy, I hope you'll forgive me for not, laying out a PowerPoint presentation on that for you, because we want to have some surprises for our opponents coming up. They're two very different games. Comoros are a team who are extremely hard-working. They're extremely together. They are reasonably direct as a team. They don't play too much tippy-tappy football. They like to go forward quite quickly. They make good runs from deep. And we need to be aware of that in terms of how we track runs, but also in terms of how we put them under pressure. Because if players are unable to play those direct passes, then that threat of runs in behind is limited somewhat. But again, I always say football, especially when you have the players of the standard that we have here with the Scorpions, should really be 70, 80% about what we do and 20, 30% about what we need to be aware of and cautious of the opponent. So for us, it's about getting our important players on the ball as often as possible in the best positions on the field as possible. And I think if we do that, we'll be able to cause Comoros a lot of problems. You go into the Tunisia game, and Tunisia have a very experienced squad, although under a new coach. So obviously their new coach comes in, these are his first games, And so you will see maybe a strategic change from Tunisia. So we have to pay attention to their first game against Madagascar on the Thursday to see what tweaks is this new coach going to make. But look, we know that Tunisia are a side that they don't feel a lot of pressure in games. So we need to make sure that we use our strengths, our speed, our guile, our creativity to cause them problems. But at the same time, understanding that if we give them too much space, that they've got players who would punish us in those situations. So it's about having the right balance in both games, really. So, but two very different opponents, but games where we think the squad, and in selecting the squad, there's different types of players in there. You know, you look at, say, in the midfield, you have someone like Hamza Barry, who's a very good player at keeping the ball. You know, his pass completion rate, whether it's at international or club level, is extremely high. You have someone like Ibrahim Darbo, who's very forward thinking. You know, he wants to get the ball, he wants to pass forward, he wants to run forward, he wants to, overlap people through the middle to try and score a goal. So different types of players that maybe the lineup that plays against Comoros will not necessarily be the lineup that plays against Tunisia. Because as with every door in this building, it needs a different key to open it. And so we'll do that. In terms of the new players into the squad, Lamin Sadi comes in. Lamin Sarr was unavailable in this camp, and Lamin Sadi's been doing very well locally for Real de Banjul. Obviously, we know he's been out on trials recently in South Africa. But even when I was here the last time, I saw him play, and he's a very confident goalkeeper. He's very comfortable with his feet as well. He wants to play. He wants to pass the ball. When you look at his statistics, even when he played for the U20s and U23s, passes to his defenders. So someone who's very comfortable on the ball, which is what we want to play football, but also someone who has a really high save ratio. So someone I think at 23 deserves this opportunity to come in and learn from the likes of Ibrahima and Sheikh Sibi, but also to compete for a place in the team. Mamadou Lion and Jai has been doing fantastically well at Kefum in Norway, obviously promoted last year, a mainstay of the team, good physical shape to a defender, but also very mobile, so someone who, if our fullbacks want to get a bit more offensive, can cover into the wide positions quite well. So we're very pleased about that. And Joseph Cisse, someone who I know maybe previous coaches have been interested in bringing into the national team, hasn't been successful. I spoke to Joseph quite early on, and we had some good conversations, and he's really just motivated and enthusiastic about pulling on that red jersey. He's also got a really good move recently to Cesena in Serie B, and he's been playing, starting every match as a really offensive fullback, good speed. If you need to, can play higher up the field, which gives us, I think a combination of him and any of our wingers, whether it's Yankuba, Ibrahima, Musa Jawara, any of those guys in front of them, I think gives you a really interesting combination in the fullback positions. And then who else do we have in there? Abdoulaye Cisse. Again, I saw him play here in the first division when I was here a few months ago. He scored a couple of goals in that game. He's went over to Estonia, and he's hit the ground running really well, not just domestically, but in European competition. And the thing I like about Abdoulaye, look, he's a young player. He's got a lot to learn still. He's only 20, but he's got good mobility as a striker. He drops into interesting positions, which allows him not just to score goals, but to get nice assists, creative assists, but also out of possession, that mobility allows him to go and press the game, which is something I think you saw in the first couple of games we want to try and do. We want to defend higher up the pitch, and that mobility is really important for us. So, yeah, the new guys coming in, but look, just because someone's named in the squad, I know I said this the last time, everybody likes new and shiny things. It's why we buy new mobile phones every couple of years, even though the old one works. We like new things, but just because you're added to the squad doesn't mean you go straight into the 11. We've got a lot of high performing players in there, but the new guys will come in and compete. And look, if they deserve to play, they'll play. But there's not an expectation that they have to play in the very first time they're in the squad.
Yeah.
It's only just about 50 minutes. Coach, with this point about the way we play defensively. The last time when we played against Gabon, led 2-0, and then the power outage happened. We all know how we went up there. And then coming back, concede 3 goals in succession. Are you not a bit worried about the defensive approach of the national team? How are we going to change that? And when you concede goals.
Yeah, the answer, there's a couple of things we need to tidy up. I'm overall not super concerned about it. So we led 1-0, not 2-0. I wish we were 2-0 up. And we should have been. I think that's the key thing for us. I think the Gabon game gave us some really interesting information, not just about the players' ability on the pitch, but their psychology. You've got to remember that over the last few years, yes, the Gambia have been super successful, but haven't been really a high-scoring team. And so conceding, you never want to concede goals. But when you're not a high-scoring team, when you only maybe score 1 goal, when you concede 1 goal, it can put your head down. You can be like, oh, so disappointing. And I think we saw that a little bit in the Gabon game, in that we were really on top of the game. And I know, unfortunately, because the lights went out and then the TV reception didn't come back in, what a lot of Gambian supporters did not see is at the start of the second half, we should have scored again. In fact, just prior to Gabon getting the equaliser, we had 3 really good chances in quick succession. Within the space of 40 seconds, we had 3 really good chances in the first 5 minutes of the second half. And that should have put us further ahead. And then Gabon scored a really nice goal on the counter-attack. They've hit us on the counter-attack. We've been maybe over-ambitious to really get that second goal, but excited about how we're playing and how we're being allowed to play. And we get hit on the counter-attack. And I think that knocked the wind out of the guys a little bit, because for the first 50 minutes of the game, we were the dominant team. And should have been 2 or 3 goals up. And so that equaliser knocked the wind out of us a little bit. Second goal is a set piece, and we need to tidy up on the set pieces. We were unhappy to concede a poor set piece against the Seychelles, and unhappy with the set piece we conceded. Unhappy in terms of how we dealt with it. So we definitely need to tighten up defensively from set pieces. There's no doubt about that. But that's been a problem going back 2 or 3 years. You can look back over the last few years, and we've conceded a few soft goals from set pieces. So we need to tighten that up. And yeah, I'm not overly concerned about it, because one, I think we were missing, if you look at all the players who were injured the last time out, most of them were defensive players. So we welcome most of them back in this time. But overall, I think our chance creation in the game is as high, if not higher, than our opponents. So 1 or 2 little tweaks, make sure we are capitalizing on our chances at the other end, and we'll be fine.
Coach, you selected a player from the National League Division 1, that is Clemency, one of the very good goalkeeper. With that selection, what message are you sending to the National League players? The second question is, you had faith in Abdoulaye Cisse, who was doing so well in Korea, when we Friday and put this work, because he has been an absolute good goal scoring striker. But another striker who has been in recent very good form for North County is Alassane Ajaka. In his past 3 games, he has scored 3 goals and contributed an assist. That's a 4-goal contribution. What led to this position on this squad?
Yeah. So I think in terms of, for the local league here, for the first division, I spoke to you the last time when I came in the press conference about levels. And so there's no doubt that I think everyone understands that the level here, we've got some fantastic players, but the league is quite a young league. Yeah. So most of our players who are really excelling in the league are the young guys, and then they get their opportunity, like Abdoulaye Cisse, as you mentioned, to go outside. Even at the other end of the spectrum, someone like Yankuba Minte, who played locally, then went to Odense, and then and now in the Premier League. So that acceleration through the levels happens quite quickly for Gambian players. Like even, I'm not going to go into names, but what you guys maybe don't know is 2 young Gambians signed for Premier League clubs in England this week. So they're young guys. You'll not see them on the pitch for a few years, but 2 of our guys, our youngsters, signed for Premier League clubs. So the acceleration from playing locally here in the Gambia to the very elite level of world football is a real fast ascent for some of these guys. But what that means is we do lose a lot of our talent very early on from the league. But for the guys who are still here, if you're performing well and if that opportunity, that space opens up in the team, then I've got no problem. I've got no problem in giving players that opportunity. Now, in certain positions, it's going to be easier than others because let's look at Lamin Sadi's opportunity. In goals, we don't have that many goalkeepers playing globally. I think we've got now we've got a goalkeeper who's just signed for a Scottish team, we've got 4 goalkeepers playing professional, which means if there's 1 or 2 injuries, we've got to look maybe into the local league. Whereas at centre forward, which we'll get onto in a minute, we've got about 15 number 9s playing professionally around the world. So to get into the Gambian league takes a bit longer in terms of selection. But if the opportunity's there and we think you're the best option, we'll call you up. There's no problem with that. Yeah. In terms of the centre forward position, look, Alassane Diatta is a player we've watched very closely. He was we actually considered him for the June camp last year, but he was injured at the end of last season. He obviously started really well at Notts County, but then from April through to the end of the season, I think from the 3rd of April to the end of the season, didn't play at all because he was out of the team. And so that meant we couldn't bring him in June. We start this season and he's done really well, and there's 2 sides to this. One, different types of players. Abdullah and him are quite different strikers. Alassane is quite a point striker. If you look at most of his goals, they're crosses, and he's a box finisher. He's someone who in the 6-yard box, 1 touch, head or foot, will score the goal with those whipped in crosses from the flanks. That and from corner kicks a big threat. Whereas Abdullah is a little bit more mobile, gets involved in the build-up play earlier in the game. And we just felt for these games in particular, that mobility in attack was a little bit more important than the point striker in terms of that. The other thing that maybe you're aware, maybe you're not, the FIFA rules say that we've got to send our invitations out to clubs 15 days before players are expected to travel. 2 of those 3 goals and 1 assist were scored after that happened. So actually the invites went out and then Alassane hit form in terms of scoring goals and getting assists. So there's that. Now, does that mean we can't invite a player late? No, absolutely. We could invite a player today if we wanted, but the club could turn it down. And obviously Notts County have games because League 2 doesn't break for the international window. So he's someone who's doing very well, and we've watched the games. I'm really super pleased with how he's doing. And, if he keeps doing that, I see him getting, an opportunity in a red shirt before too long.